This man never said nothing racist or hated or hateful towards black people. I followed this man very closely and watched many of his debates, and I stand in agreement with a lot of the things that he say.
How ironic. Now, when it comes to Charlie Kirk and his rhetoric, there is a division between his supporters and his critics. Where his critics see a guy with racist talking points, his supporters see a man who is being taken out of context. And some of what Charlie Kirk has said has been argued that the only reason that people are getting mad at him for saying it is because he's white. And even though you can find a black man saying the same thing, the black man gets a pass. But Charlie Kirk gets crucified for having the same sentiment, such as when he said this.
Just customer service, at times you can't. Here's what's upsetting to me, Heather, is if I'm dealing with somebody in customer service who's a moronic black woman, I wonder, is she there because of her excellence, or is she there because of affirmative action? It almost creates,
which is sort of kind of similar to the concerns that Cat Williams expressed when he said this.
I don't want to live in a country with just niggas. No, I don't. I have too many customer service needs and requirements that I have become accustomed to. Fuck that. Y'all know what the fuck I'm talking about. You done try to return something to a black woman at a store and she act like she bought you that shit herself personally and shit, just embarrassing you in the store. Just, well, what the fuck is wrong with it? Never mind, bitch. I don't know why I gotta have two toasters because you mad and shit. This is ridiculous.
So Cat Williams will get a pass because he's a black comedian, and on top of that, he also has the comedic license to cross the line that regular folk, they might get canceled or get in trouble for. Whereas Charlie Kirk should be canceled for characterizing a black woman as being moronic while working in customer service. Now, honestly, in my opinion, pointing out that there are black women with funky attitudes who work in customer service, in my opinion, that does not make you a racist. I mean, because there are black women who acknowledge that there are other black women with funky attitudes who work in customer service all over the United States and probably even the world. Now, I've seen where a black woman in customer service, I've seen where they will treat a white customer with respect, but then have an attitude when it's a black customer. So maybe there's some validity to the idea that Charlie Kirk is getting a little bit more flack because he's a white man. But then, after you keep listening to Charlie Kirk speak, eventually he winds up saying something that is indefensible, at least for the ones who spend their time trying to defend him from being labeled as a racist or a white supremacist. And Charlie Kirk's rhetoric that is being used to define him as a racist or white supremacist are his views about affirmative action as it is related to black people.
you know, if we would have said 3 weeks ago, Blake, if we would have said that Joy Reid and Michelle Obama and Sheila Jackson Lee and Ketanji Brown Jackson were affirmative action picks, we would have been called the racist.
Now, after he said what he said regarding Michelle Obama, Sheila Jackson Lee, Ketanji Brown, and Joy Reid, there were people on one side who said that Charlie Kirk didn't believe that black women had the brain processing power to be taken very seriously. While people on the other side said, Charlie Kirk didn't say all black women. No, he just named 4 women who happen to be black. He's not a racist. See, you guys are taking all of his words out of context. You have to listen to the whole message. And that's just what we're going to do. Now, here's the thing. I'm black and I'm conservative. But when I see the content that's coming from other black conservatives, it's almost like there's an unspoken rule that in order to be authentically black and conservative, you have to play dumb to whatever black people are talking about so as not to upset your white constituency or white following, which in my opinion is arguably more of an offense than borderline racist rhetoric coming from the likes of Charlie Kirk. I mean, I saw a content creator who goes by the name of Officer Tatum. I saw him chastising another black dude for expressing ambivalence about Charlie Kirk.
I don't know how black people, listen, I know how young black people are silly. I don't know how grown black people are silly. Like, bro, at some point you have to have run into knowledge that can give you a better perspective where you're not this silly. Roll the clip.
I'm heartbroken and devastated at the death of Charlie Kirk for a couple reasons. Number one, I mourn for his wife. I mourn for his children. I mourn for his loved ones. I mourn for all of those that loved him. And as a human who has empathy, regardless of your political views or where you stand on the aisle, right now it's time to mourn with those that are mourning and weep with those that are weeping. And so that is what I'm literally and figuratively doing. Simultaneously, I haven't found the words to say, Kieran, and I haven't found the words to say because when I look into so much of what people love and loved Charlie Kirk for, I'm like, okay, Emmanuel, your empathy is birthed from a belief that no person should die before their time, and absolutely no person should die as a result of gun violence, especially outside of war. But Charlie Kirk, he proudly stated that death by guns is a price we have to pay for our Second Amendment rights. And he said that it was worth it.
Now, Officer Tatum's gestures appear to be communicating to his audience that none of what this man is saying should be taken seriously, even though he expresses a sentiment that is not unique only to him, but to a vast cohort of foundational Black Americans as well. Now, he then points out that the fact that this man made a mistake in thinking that Charlie Kirk was calling a man a racial slur when all he was doing was saying the man's name.
Charlie Kirk's death has led me to an uncomfortable conversation that I want to facilitate. To my white brothers and sisters, how would you hope your minority friends respond to the celebration of Charlie Kirk's life when he has very publicly said things like this?
I live like a capitalist every single day, Shank. I live as a capitalist.
Refer to Asian individuals by the C word, a word violent for me.
He referred to Asian, somebody get that boy. He referred to Asian individuals as a C word. First of all, there's no C word, you idiot. And second of all, that was Chank Euchre, who he was arguing with. So he didn't call nobody a Chank. He was talking about Chank Euchre, who, if you played the full clip, you idiot, you just sitting on here, you just sitting on there taking clips off the internet, talking about you processing. Fool, you don't even do no real research.
Mr. Tatum used this as the catalyst for why all of the man's accusation of Charlie Kirk's so-called racism should not be taken seriously. But if he is consistent with this sentiment, that one mistake means that the messenger is compromised when he makes a mistake. Okay, keep that same energy, because let's see if he has that same energy after we break down the mistakes in Charlie Kirk's diatribe about 4 women who were coincidentally Black and lacking brain power to be taken seriously. First, let's hear Charlie Kirk in his own words, uninterrupted.
You know, if we would have said 3 weeks ago, Blake, if we would have said that Joy Reid and Michelle Obama and Sheila Jackson Lee and Ketanji Brown Jackson were affirmative action picks, we would have been called the racist. But now they're coming out and they're saying it for us. They're coming out and they're saying, I'm only here because of affirmative action. Yeah, we know. You do not have the brain processing power to otherwise be taken really seriously. You had to go steal a white person's slot to go be taken somewhat seriously. Play cut 52.
But I rise today as a clear recipient of affirmative action, and particularly in higher education. I may have been admitted on affirmative action, both in terms of being a woman and a woman of color, but I can declare that I did not graduate on affirmative action. This is my personal story.
I hear because of action affirmative. She can't even say that. We know. It's very obvious to us that you were not smart enough to be able to get in on your own. I couldn't make it on my own, so I needed to take opportunities from someone more deserving. You know, this is how arrogant Joy Reid and Ketanji Brown Jackson and Michelle Obama and Sheila Jackson Lee are. They're so narcissistic, they think this is persuasive. They think we're like, oh, of course, that's why we need affirmative action, because you have impressed us with your brilliance. Of course. Oh no, imagine the world without Joy Reid. Imagine the world without Sheila Jackson Lee or Michelle Obama or Ketanji Brown Jackson. They think this is persuasive. They think, as they kind of now reveal that I'm only here because of anti-white, anti-Asian forced discrimination policies that turn me into a bitter, resentful activist that hates white people, honestly, through our policies.
Now, after hearing Charlie Kirk in his own words, did you find anything problematic with what he said? Some will say no, and some will say yes. But let's give him the benefit of the doubt and say that he rolled the dice and 4 black women just so happened to randomly show up as the examples for his chastisement of affirmative action. Okay, cool. But even if that were random, there are 3 statements that he made that are indefensible remarks pertaining to affirmative action. And these remarks expose the willful blindness to Charlie Kirk's outright blatant racial bias. But be under no delusion, this is not to change anyone's mind, for as my father advised me, a man convinced against his will is a man of his opinion still. And likewise, a biblical scripture quotes Jesus in Matthew 13:13, having said, though seeing, they do not see. Though hearing, they do not hear. What I'm about to expose in Charlie Kirk's words is considerably less ambiguous than Jesus quoting a parable. But willful oblivion is expected from those who endeavor to make infallible gods out of men.
But now they're coming out and they're saying it for us.
Now, the first mistake Charlie Kirk made, which may or may not be as problematic as the 2 that are to follow, is that he says they are coming out and saying that affirmative action is how they were able to receive certain opportunities. Yet he only shows an example of one person admitting to it, and that was Sheila Jackson Lee. Now, to be fair, Ketanji Brown, I would concede that point. She certainly was a DEI candidate, at least by the admission of Joe Biden's own biased agenda. I mean, Joe Biden, he willfully closed his eyes to the possibility of any other qualified candidate as Supreme Court justice picks. He eliminated black men, white men, Hispanic men, matter of fact, all men and white women. And he only made women of color eligible for consideration. And though that may have been a win for the sisterhood, I most certainly can see the problem in that. But, you know, after all, she is married to a white guy, so maybe that also factored into Joe Biden's selectivity. But that still doesn't answer for Michelle Obama or Joy Reid. Why would you mention them if you truly don't have a bone to pick with black women? Or maybe it's just black women on the left. Or maybe it's black women who hold positions of power. Or maybe it has something to do with West Point rejecting his application, where he somehow comes up with the reasoning that, quote, a far less qualified candidate of a different gender and a different persuasion, end quote, stole his slot. To which now I'm curious, how did he manage to get that specific of information? I mean, did they include that in the rejection letter? Or was his arrogance so high that he reasoned with himself that the only way that he could be rejected from West Point was if affirmative action had something to do with it? Now, unless you believe that everyone lacks the brain processing power to read in between the lines, then you'd fool yourself into believing that we can't deduce that he has a bone to pick with at least women of color. And that woman of color that he had a bone to pick with was more than likely black, giving his evident singling out of the women who he believes lacks the brain processing power to be taken seriously. Of that, we can only speculate, though. But what's more problematic is that when multiple people are characterizing someone as spewing white supremacist rhetoric, the accuser is often dismissed without having been asked why they believe what it is that they believe. Because one of the tenets of white supremacy is a sentiment that white is the default above all races in God's creation.
You had to go steal a white person's slot to go be taken somewhat seriously. You had to go steal a white person's slot.
Now, Charlie Kirk did not, I repeat, did not say they were stealing a more deserving person's slot. No, he said
A white person's slot.
they had to go and steal a white person's slot. Now, what unmitigated caucasity would make him believe that the slot rightfully belonged to a white person? Sounds like the kind of racial bias that his supporters hear but are unwilling to admit. See, this is where they change the subject if you bring this up. They change the subject, or they respond to your claims by showing you examples of how he helped a black person somewhere at some point in time, or they show you that he was friends with Candace Owens or some other black person who never challenged him, or they change the subject to talk about how he was a man of faith, and somehow that is supposed to erase the fact that he said what he said. And the irony in the whole affirmative action diatribe is that it was intended to offset this very problematic thinking that Charlie Kirk allowed to slip from his lips. See, the idea that white was the default. The idea that no one else belongs in those slots because those slots belong to a specific race. That's what he said. And anyone found in those slots who is not white stole it. This is indefensible and tacit admission of racial bias. And though people argue that he couldn't have been racist because he believed that race was a social construct, well, he conveniently made references to those social constructs to make his point about those slots and who those slots belong to. And last but certainly not least, this statement right here.
They think as they kind of now reveal that I'm only here because of anti-white, anti-Asian forced discrimination policies that turned me into a bitter, resentful activist that hates white people, honestly, through our policies.
Anti-white, anti-Asian, hates white people through our policies. Now, for someone who has all the statistics on black crime and how well black people did before the Civil Rights Act and how many fatherless black households there are and how many Negro crackheads can change an alternator for $1.25, you can't convince me that he did not know the stats on affirmative action. Anti-white? All right, let's do a Google search and find out just how anti-white these policies actually were. Which group benefited the most from affirmative action? Bam! Right there in your face. Studies and scholarly analysts suggest that white women had disproportionately benefited from affirmative action policies, particularly in the workplace and higher education. So where is this anti-white policy when his own mother is who he should have been going after? These are the ones who more than likely took his imaginary slot at West Point. These are the ones whose brain processing power he was really mad at. But to single out a group of women who got crumbs and not the groups of women in your own community who made off with the whole cake. If you honestly believe that black people, or any other person for that matter, regardless of their political persuasion or lack thereof, if you honestly believe that gaslighting everyone who takes issue with this blatant racially biased rhetoric is going to work, you really think that? Then you certainly possess the brain processing power that cannot be taken seriously. Check, mate.